A piercing siren screamed through the humid Atlanta night as blue and red lights bounced off the glass storefronts of Peachtree Street. Officer Greg Mallory slammed his cruiser door and adjusted his belt with a grunt, his eyes narrowing at the figure walking calmly down the sidewalk. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a navy blue tailored suit, his shoes gleaming under the streetlights. A leather briefcase swinging casually at his side. Mallory clicked his radio. Dispatch. Suspect matching. Description cited. Black male, late 30s, carrying a briefcase. Approaching now. The man paused as two officers stepped into his path. "Even in, sir," Mallory said, resting a hand on his holstered weapon. "Mind telling us what you're doing around here this late?" The man looked up slowly, his deep brown eyes calm but unreadable. "Walking. Is that a crime now?" His voice was smooth, educated, and measured something about it irritated Mallory. "We got a call about a break-in 2 blocks from here," said Officer Jenkins. Younger, fidgety, his hand also twitching near his weapon. "You match the description." The man raised an eyebrow. "And what description would that be?" "Tall, black, dark clothes, briefcase," Mallory snapped. "That enough for you?" A moment of silence stretched between them. The man let out a soft exhale, clearly disappointed but not surprised. "My name is Elias Grant," he said quietly. "I have just finished a dinner meeting with the mayor's office." Mallory smirked. "Sure you did." ID Elias reached slowly into his inner jacket pocket, his movements deliberate. But the second his hand moved, Jenkins shouted, "Gun!" and lunged. In the chaos that followed, Elias was thrown to the ground, his briefcase flying open, scattering papers across the sidewalk, contracts, legal documents, and a gleaming Department of Justice badge. But neither officer saw that. Jenkins jammed his knee into Elias's back, yanking his arms behind him as Mallory cuffed him. "You have the right to remain silent," Mallory growled, ignoring Elias' calm voice. "You're making a mistake," Elias said. "Please, look inside the case. Shut it." Jenkins yanked Elias to his feet, blood dripping from a fresh gash on his forehead. Back at the precinct, things began to unravel. "Name?" The desk sergeant barked. "Elias Grant." He was thrown into a holding cell, his phone confiscated, despite his request to call someone. Hours passed. Then a door slammed open. Chief Howard burst into the room, face pale. "Where is he? Where is Elias Grant?" Mallory, confused, gestured toward the holding cells. "He's in 3. Howard stormed in, the officers trailing behind him. When he saw Elias sitting calmly on the bench, shirt wrinkled and stained with dried blood, the chief's face crumbled in horror. "Mr. Grant." "Sir." I am so sorry." Mallory blinked. "Wait, what?" Howard turned slowly toward his officers, his face now red with fury. "You 2 idiots just arrested the Deputy Attorney General of the United States." Mallory felt his stomach turn cold. What? Elias stood, brushing himself off slowly. "I told them I had just left the mayor's office. They didn't listen." Howard stammered. "I had no idea you were in town. We weren't informed. I'm not required to report my movements to local PD." "Chief," Elias said. His voice was sharp now, like a blade. "But I did expect not to be tackled in the street for the crime of walking while black." The silence was suffocating. Jenkins spoke, his voice trembling. "Sir, we thought you had a gun. You thought," Elias said coldly, "that my skin color made me dangerous." Howard tried to recover. "Sir, please, let us make this right. We had no idea." "I don't want apologies," Elias snapped. "I want accountability." He pointed to the surveillance cameras. "Those tapes better be preserved. And I expect your body cam footage hasn't magically disappeared," Mallory muttered. "Mine was on." "So was mine," Jenkins added weakly. "Good," Elias said. Retrieving his now crumpled badge from the case, an officer handed him. "Because the DOJ will be requesting every second." Howard looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Please, Mr. Grant, allow me to explain to Internal Affairs. These are good men, just mistaken. Mistaken could have cost me my life." Elias growled. "Would I still be a mistake?" if I'd been shot in the back. Mallory stepped forward. Sir, one swear. I didn't mean. Intent means nothing. Impact is everything. Suddenly, the mayor herself arrived, having been called by a frantic staffer who heard what happened. Mayor Tanya Blake, a petite black woman in her 50s, stormed into the precinct, her heels clicking sharply. Elias, she gasped, rushing toward him. They told me, are you okay? I've had better nights, he replied. She turned on the officers. Do you have any idea who this man is? He's in town because I invited him to help advise on reforming your department. Dead silence. The next morning, news had already spread. Local headlines blazed. Deputy Attorney General wrongfully arrested in racial profiling incident. The DOJ released a statement condemning the behavior. Elias himself addressed the press outside City Hall. I was not mistaken for a criminal. I was assumed to be one, he said, because no matter how high we rise, no matter what titles we hold, there are still those who see only our skin, and that must change. The story was far from over. Elias stood on the steps of City Hall, the glare of camera flashes lighting his face as reporters surged forward, all desperate to capture every syllable that dropped from his mouth. But despite the chaos, his voice remained steady, powerful, and deliberate. My experience is not unique, he said, eyes scanning the crowd, but it is an example, an undeniable, crystal clear example of what happens when assumptions replace facts, when bias overrides judgment, when fear masquerades as protocol. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He continued, last night, I was tackled, handcuffed, and humiliated. Not because of any crime I committed, but because of how I look. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't resist. I complied, even as blood ran down my face. I told them who I was. They didn't care. Someone called out, what do you want done about it? Elias paused, his gaze locking with the man's. Accountability, transparency, our reform. Mayor Blake stepped up beside him, her voice strong. And that's exactly why Mr. Grant is in Atlanta. We brought him here to help us evaluate and restructure policing in our city. Ironically, he became the victim of the very system he was here to help fix. Elias turned to her, nodding solemnly. I didn't ask for this spotlight, but I won't waste it. Not when I know there are thousands, millions who have no badge to show, no political connection to protect them. Inside the precinct, officers Mallory and Jenkins sat like statues as Internal Affairs entered the room. Two suited investigators, one white, one Latino, moved with quiet authority. Officers, said Agent Ramirez, flipping open his notebook. Let's talk about last night, Jenkins gulped. We thought he had a weapon. We're aware of your statement. The second investigator, Agent Collins, cut in. We'll be reviewing all body cam footage, surveillance, stats recordings, and your use of force reports. And just to be clear, this interview is not optional. Yes, sir. Collins raised an eyebrow. Sir, you didn't call Mr. Grant, sir, while his face was in the sidewalk. Ramirez frowned. According to Mr. Grant's account, he identified himself verbally at least twice. Neither of you verified his ID. Why? I didn't think. Jenkins trailed off. That much is clear, Collins snapped. Meanwhile, in his hotel suite, Elias sat across from Mayor Blake, now dressed in a fresh gray suit. She poured him a glass of water, her expression tight. I can't even tell you how ashamed I am, she said softly. You shouldn't be, Elias replied. You didn't throw me to the pavement. No, but I hired them. You inherited them, he corrected gently, and now you have a chance to change that, starting with real policy, ending qualified immunity, funding training, real training, not more body armor. She looked at him, eyes wet. Do you still want to help us? Elias paused, more than ever. Later that evening, Elias sat quietly at the city council meeting, now fully packed, overflowing into the hallway. Word had spread, and people from every background had come to see what would happen next. When Elias was invited to the podium, the crowd rose to its feet. He raised a hand, asking for silence. "Thank you," he began. "But I'd rather we save our applause for change, not speeches." A ripple of quiet laughter. "I didn't fly down here to become the story, but now that I am, I have a responsibility to speak, not just as Deputy Attorney General, but as a black man in America." He glanced at the police chief, seated stiffly near the front. "What happened to me is what happens every day to young men who don't have law degrees, to mothers pulled over for looking suspicious, to kids walking home in hoodies. We cannot train our way out of bias. We must reimagine what protection means, because right now, the system protects itself." Several people in the chamber nodded solemnly. "I'm not asking for perfection," Elias said, voice rising, "but I'm demanding humanity." After the meeting, Elias stepped into the night air, breathing deeply. A young boy, no more than 10, stood hesitantly nearby with his mother. "Mr. Grant," the boy said, clutching a notebook. Elias smiled and knelt. "What's your name, young man?" "Jordan." "Nice to meet you, Jordan," the boy whispered. "My mom said you work for the president." "I do." Jordan's eyes lit up. "Can I work for the president someday, too?" Elias smiled, signing his notebook. "Yes, Jordan. And I'll make sure no one tries to tackle you on your way there." Inside the precinct, Officer Mallory stared at his suspension notice in disbelief. Jenkins had already left in tears. Chief Howard stood in front of him, stone-faced. "You humiliated this department, and you could have cost a man his life." Mallory's voice was bitter. "He set us up." "No," Howard snapped. "You set yourself up. He gave you his name, his ID. You ignored him. What you saw was a threat because he was black and confident. That's your failure, not his." Outside, Elias stood watching quietly. Howard came out a moment later. "Mr. Grant," he said, "I want you to know, we're going to fix this. Even if it costs me my badge." Elias looked him dead in the eye. "Then you're finally doing your job." 3 weeks later, national media was still running the story. Elias returned to Washington, greeted by colleagues who shook his hand with new gravity. But the real change was happening far from the spotlight. In Atlanta, Mayor Blake pushed forward sweeping new reforms: community accountability boards, mandatory bias training, de-escalation first policies, and a new rule: body cams must be active at all times or the officer is immediately suspended. In schools, Elias' story was used in debate classes, at barbershops, Dutch churches, dinner tables. People were talking, really talking. Elias was invited to speak at Morehouse College, where he stood before hundreds of young black men. "You are not defined by their fear," he said, voice raw with passion. "You are defined by your excellence, your brilliance, your power. Don't let the system dim your light. Be louder, be bolder, be undeniable." That night, alone, in his hotel room, Elias sat at the window, watching the city pulse beneath him. A knock at the door. It was Mayor Blake. "Just wanted to say thank you," she said, handing him a letter. He opened it. It was from Jordan, the boy with the notebook. "Dear Mr. Grant, thank you for not being mad. Thank you for being brave. I told my teacher I want to be like you. She said I already am." Elias smiled softly, his throat tightening. He folded the letter, slipped it into his coat, and looked back at the skyline. There was still so much work to do, but now the world was watching. Elias walked into the Department of Justice headquarters with a silence that held weight. Every step echoed through the marbled corridors, and as he passed, heads turned, not out of pity, not even out of curiosity. It was respect now earned not just through position or title, but through lived truth, through fire. Attorney General Linda Vasquez waited at the top of the staircase. She met him with a somber nod. "You good?" "I will be," Elias replied. "But I'm not done yet." She motioned him into the conference room. Around the table sat the Civil Rights Division, top brass from the Office of Police Reform, and 3 members of the President's Advisory Council. Their faces were serious, their notepads full. Let's get to it, Elias said, taking his seat at the head of the table. For the next hour, Elias outlined a new federal initiative, the Equity and Enforcement Act, aimed at incentivizing police departments nationwide to adopt reform-based practices. Departments that complied would receive federal funding and technology support. Those that didn't, subject to investigation and federal audits. This isn't about punishing cops, Elias said. It's about protecting citizens. Because this system wasn't built broken. It was built this way. And we're here to rebuild it. One official leaned forward. This is going to get blowback. Elias nodded. Let them push back. We'll push forward harder. After the meeting, Elias exited into the warm Washington air. A journalist spotted him from the sidewalk and rushed over. Mr. Grant, any thoughts on your viral arrest now that you've returned to D.C.? He paused. Then, with a hint of a smile, said, I turned their mistake into a mandate. The clip hit national news that evening. Back in Atlanta, things had already started shifting. Officer Jenkins had resigned, issuing a public apology. Mallory was suspended indefinitely, pending further review. Chief Howard began hosting public forums with citizens every Saturday in the community center. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Weeks passed. Then a letter arrived on Elias's desk. It was from Jenkins. Dear Mr. Grant, I'm sorry, not just for what I did to you, but for all the times I saw someone like you and jumped to conclusions. I never thought of myself as racist, but that doesn't mean I wasn't biased. I've been attending counseling, listening, learning. I don't know if it's enough, but I'm trying. And it started with you. Elias reread it 3 times. Then he set it down, leaned back, and closed his eyes. He didn't know if Jenkins would truly change, but he knew one thing. The conversation had begun. Months later, Elias was invited to speak at the White House. In the East Room, the president stood beside him as he approached the podium. This man, the president began, showed us what justice looks like, not just in courtrooms, but on sidewalks, not just in laws, but in hearts. Elias nodded slowly, then addressed the room. When I was a boy, my father told me being black in America means being excellent without room for error. That has haunted me for years, but today, I say no more. We deserve space to breathe, to walk, to exist, not as threats, but as citizens. A standing ovation followed. Some wept, some simply stared, moved beyond words. After the ceremony, Elias stepped out onto the South Lawn. His phone buzzed. It was Mayor Blake. Atlanta PD just approved the new Civilian Review Board, she said. Elias smiled. You made it happen. No, you lit the match. A breeze rustled through the cherry blossoms as Elias looked up at the American flag waving above the White House. And then, one final ripple. In a small courtroom in Alabama, a young public defender stood facing a judge. Her client, a 16-year-old boy arrested for loitering outside a mall, was facing unnecessary charges. She cited the Elias Grant versus City of Atlanta precedent, now a landmark case in civil rights law. The judge sighed. Case dismissed. Outside, the defender texted a simple thank you to the man who had given her the legal precedent and the inspiration. Elias sat on a train platform a few hours later, ready to head to his next destination. He looked down the track, briefcase by his side, suit sharp as ever. But this time, he wasn't just a man with a badge. He was a symbol, a story, a reckoning. A young officer across the platform noticed him and stiffened. Sir, he called out nervously, approaching. You're Deputy Grant, right? Elias looked up. I am. I just wanted to say thank you. My precinct's training program changed because of you. We had to watch your speech. I didn't get it before, but now I see it. I see you. Elias stood slowly, extended a hand. What's your name, officer? Diaz. Jason Diaz. Good to meet you, Jason. They shook hands. No tension, just respect. The train arrived, doors hissing open. Elias boarded, took a window seat, and as the city rolled past him, he allowed himself a small smile. This journey wasn't over. It never would be. But for the first time in a long while, Elias Grant felt like justice had legs, and it was finally learning how to run. 2 months later, Elias sat quietly at his mother's kitchen table in Charleston, South Carolina. The morning sun spilled across the wood floors. The smell of fresh cornbread wafted from the oven. His mother, Bernice Grant, a retired high school history teacher, moved slowly around the kitchen, her eyes watching him closely. "You don't look rested," she said finally, setting a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. "I haven't been," Elias admitted, wrapping his hands around the mug. "You've been doing too much. I've been doing just enough." She sat across from him, her voice softening. "You know I'm proud of you, right?" He nodded, barely. But I need to ask," she continued. "When do you stop fighting and start living?" Elias looked out the window. When boys like Jordan can walk home at night without a second thought. When mothers don't fear flashing lights. When a black man in a suit doesn't have to prove he belongs on the sidewalk. Bernice leaned back, staring into his face. "You sound like your father." He smiled faintly. "I hear his voice every day. He'd be proud, Eli, but he'd want you to rest too. You can't carry the world on your back. You're not Atlas." "I'm not trying to carry the world, Ma. I'm trying to change it." That night, Elias visited his father's grave. The cemetery was still, the air cool and thick with the scent of jasmine. He knelt, brushing leaves from the stone. "Albert Grant, beloved husband, father, and freedom fighter. You always said it'd be my voice." "Dad," Elias whispered, "not my fists." "You were right, but sometimes I wonder if they'd have listened faster if I just shouted." The wind whispered through the trees, and in that silence, Elias felt an answer, not words, just strength. The next morning, back in Washington, Elias was called into a closed-door meeting with the President and Attorney General Vasquez. "There's a problem in Missouri," Vasquez said. "Small town. Video just leaked of a black teen being brutalized by local deputies. It's already viral." Elias clenched his jaw. "Who's handling it?" The president leaned forward. "You." Elias nodded once. "When do I leave?" That night, Elias was on a plane to Caldwell, Missouri, a town of 35,000 people, mostly white, with a police department that hadn't updated its policies since the 90s. The video was horrifying, grainy footage of 17-year-old Malik Turner being slammed against a cruiser hood, his cries ignored. When Elias arrived, the town was already boiling. Protesters on one side of the street, counter-protesters on the other. The mayor, a nervous man in his 50s, greeted Elias at the city hall steps. "Mr. Grant, I appreciate your time. I'm not here for pleasantries." Elias cut in. "Where's Malik?" "At County General concussion, broken wrist. He's awake." Elias went straight to the hospital. Malik lay in bed, his face bruised and puffy. His mother sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. "Mr. Grant," she said, eyes wide. "I can't believe you're here." Elias approached, his expression gentle. "I saw the video. I'm so sorry this happened." Malik blinked slowly. "They said I matched a suspect." "What were you doing?" "Walking home. From the gas station. I had a Snapple and a bag of chips." Elias sat beside him. "They'll pay for this." Malik looked him in the eye. "Will they? Or will they just get suspended for a week and come back?" That question hit hard. Elias reached into his jacket and pulled out something small. It was Jordan's letter. "You see this?" he said. "A boy wrote this to me after I was wrongfully arrested because of what happened. His school started a program. His police department changed their training. You matter, Malik. You're not just a name in a file." Later, Elias stood at a press conference outside the hospital. "We are opening a full federal investigation into the Caldwell Police Department. All officers involved in Malik Turner's assault will be placed on administrative leave, effective immediately." Reporters shouted questions. One asked, "Mr. Grant, how do you keep doing this? Aren't you tired?" Elias didn't hesitate. Yes, I am tired. But justice doesn't care how tired I am. Back in Atlanta, Jordan and his mother watched the press conference on TV. Jordan looked up. Mom, that's the man we met. He's helping again. She smiled softly. Yes, baby. He never stopped. A week later, Elias returned to DC to find his office covered in yellow sticky notes. Dozens of them. Messages from staff, from interns, from janitors, from the security guard at the front desk. You inspire me. Thank you for fighting. Because of you, I enrolled in law school. You showed me a black man in power doesn't have to compromise. He sank into his chair and stared at the sea of notes. One caught his eye. The system didn't break you. You broke it open. That night, he attended a gala for civil rights leaders and reformers. He didn't plan to speak. But as the room filled with applause and his name was announced, Elias rose. He took the stage, looked out at a crowd of activists, parents, students, survivors, and allies, then spoke with the fire of 1,000 sleepless nights. I was arrested for walking while black, he began. I was tackled while wearing a suit. I bled on the pavement while carrying a DOJ badge. But that moment didn't define me. It reminded me why I do this. He scanned the room, every bruise, every headline, every insult. I carry them with me, and I wear them like armor, because if I don't fight, who will? A silence filled the room. Then the entire audience stood, tears, applause, thunderous, unrelenting. After the event, a young girl approached him with her father. Mr. Grant, she whispered. I want to be a judge, he smiled. You already sound like one. And finally, months later, on the anniversary of his arrest, Elias returned to Atlanta. He walked the same sidewalk where it all happened. The pavement was clean. A small bronze plaque had been installed discreetly near the corner, in honor of Elias Grant, a man who turned pain into power. He stood there, silent, until someone tapped his shoulder. It was Officer Diaz, the young man from the train platform. I asked to be transferred here, Diaz said, because I want to serve differently. I want to be the kind of cop that kids like Jordan trust. Because of you. Elias smiled, a slow, deep smile full of memory and meaning. Then let's walk, he said. And they did, side by side. Past the shops, past the lights, past the place where one story ended and another began. Because justice, real justice, doesn't come in one big moment. It comes step by step, voice by voice. One man standing when others would fall. And Elias Grant, he was still standing, still fighting, still undeniable. 1 year later, the auditorium at Howard University was filled to capacity. Students, professors, parents, even journalists stood shoulder to shoulder. The university had invited Elias Grant to give the keynote speech for their annual social justice and legal reform symposium. The energy was electric. Students chanted his name as he entered, not as a celebrity, but as a symbol. Elias walked up to the podium slowly. He wasn't in a flashy suit. He wore a simple black turtleneck and blazer. His beard had grown slightly. His face was wiser now, carrying the weight of 1,000 conversations, marches, policies, and scars. When the applause faded, he leaned forward into the mic. 1 year ago today, I was face down on the concrete, bleeding. I'd done nothing wrong. I was wearing a suit. I carried a badge, but none of it mattered. Not to them. The room fell pin-drop silent. I didn't come here to repeat that story. You've heard it. You know it. You've lived it. What I came here to say is this. They didn't break me. They revealed me. Students leaned forward, captivated. I was supposed to be in Atlanta to help rewrite policing policy. Instead, I became the proof that it needed rewriting. It was humiliating, it was painful, but it was also necessary. Because sometimes the world doesn't listen to numbers or data or even protests. Sometimes it takes blood on the pavement to wake people up. He paused. A deep breath. I don't say that lightly. I say it because every one of you here has a moment waiting for you. A moment that will ask, will you stay silent or will you rise? Because our justice system won't fix itself. It was designed to resist change. You have to be louder than the resistance. In the front row, Jordan sat with his mom. now 11 years old, eyes wide and burning with purpose. On his lap was a leather folder, inside it, Elias's original letter back to him. Elias saw him and smiled. "Jordan, I see you, young man. One day, you'll be the one up here." Jordan beamed. Elias finished the speech with quiet strength. Change doesn't come in lightning bolts. It comes in rain, steady, uncomfortable, constant. Be the rain. Afterward, students flooded the stage to shake his hand, ask for mentorship. Thank him for being what so many had never seen, a black man with power who never forgot where he came from. Later that night, Elias sat in his hotel room, lights dimmed, phone buzzing with messages and praise. But one message made him stop. It was a video message. From Malik Turner. Elias opened it. Malik, now with his cast off, stood confidently in a hoodie and jeans in front of his school library. "Hey, Mr. Grant," he said, "I got accepted to 3 colleges, pre-law. I just wanted you to know I didn't let what happened break me, because you didn't let it break you." The screen went black. Elias sat in silence, emotions threatening to rise like a tide. And in that moment, he knew it had all been worth it. 6 months after that, the Equity and Enforcement Act passed through Congress. It wasn't easy. It took months of lobbying, town halls, testimonies, but it passed by a narrow but powerful vote. President Vasquez, newly elected, and the first Latina president in U.S. history, signed it into law with Elias standing beside her. "Your pain built this policy," she whispered as the cameras flashed. "You gave it blood and breath." Elias nodded. "And now it'll save lives." In Atlanta, the sidewalk where Elias had once bled was now renamed Elias Grant Way. A mural rose up on the brick wall beside it. It showed Elias not in his suit, not with a badge, but in a hoodie, standing beside a young Jordan and a recovering Malik. The words above their heads read, "Stand for those who are still on the ground." At the unveiling, Elias gave no speech. He just stood there, his hand resting on Jordan's shoulder, tears glistening in his eyes. Behind them, thousands of people cheered not for a man, but for a movement, for justice that had a name, for Elias Grant. And far beyond that street, his impact kept moving. In Ferguson, a teen cited Elias v. Caldwell, PD, to have charges dismissed. In New York, a detective turned in her badge, inspired to become a civil rights attorney. In Oakland, a black mother held her son's hand tighter and whispered, "You're protected now. They see us." And in a quiet town in Mississippi, a police officer paused before pulling over a black driver for no reason. He hesitated, then slowly put his lights off. Drove on. No harassment, no incident. Because even there, Elias Grant had reached. 10 years later, a massive courthouse stood in Washington, D.C., the new home of the National Institute for Justice Reform. Its main courtroom was named the Grant Chamber. Inside, a bronze statue stood tall in the atrium. Elias, briefcase in one hand, the other holding out his DOJ badge. His expression wasn't angry. It was calm, certain. A plaque at the base read, "He walked while black. They tried to stop him. He made them move." A group of school children stood nearby, listening to their teacher. Who knows what he said the day he passed the Equity Act? A little girl raised her hand. "Be the rain." "Exactly," the teacher said. "Now let's say it together." And 50 young voices rose together, echoing through the halls he built, "Be our rain." Because Elias Grant wasn't just a man who was arrested for no reason. He was the reason the system was never the same again.